Here's the hose I took off. You might want to flush your system while you're at it. I bought this flush gun. Helps a little bit with the air pressure. For 50 bucks on eBay.
Don't step on it, it's weak.
For me, this part of the hose was fairly stuck on there, and I took a rather soft and used screwdriver with rounded edges and came up, pried it a bit, not too hard. It's a good condition hose, so I can keep it, I think. And then critically, when I came to pull it off, I gripped it rather evenly around the edges, so it kind of wants to expand as you're pulling it, and then it popped off real easy. Otherwise, wiggling it back and forth was not productive, or not very productive anyway. Some tutorials say you have to take off the fan. That's totally not true.
Main purpose of that, I guess, is so it's easier to scrape off the old gasket.
This is a about 2.5 inch extension. Here's a 10mm socket. Let's switch to the GoPro. There's one bolt in there, and then directly on the other side, another small bolt right in there. Mine wasn't tight at all. It's already pre-loosened, so I'm not going to put on my gloves.
If you had a magnetic 10mm socket, it would be better, because it's awkward to hold the screws. And also, see that plastic housing up there? You can look and see the left side screw from the top if you look between the plastic housing and the engine from above. So you might have a paper gasket stuck on there. You might have some old goop stuck on there. So what you have to scrape off really depends. And you might not have to scrape off the old gasket, but you don't want a bad gasket. So inspect the gasket that's stuck on the engine block.
Gasket's a little deformed.
If your heater doesn't work, then now could be a time to take that exit from the heater core that you just disconnected, and then go find the entrance to the heater core, which is a hose that is pretty much arriving right next to it when it goes into the engine from the passenger compartment.
So clean up the gunk in there.
I'll show some sped up footage of the heater core clean out process.
See that hose clamp? Shiny dot down there? That's how you take that hose off. In my case, it's a 5/16 or 8mm. And it is pretty stuck on there.
And it's super awkward getting down in there and taking stuff off. You can barely see what you're doing. This would be the time for the GoPro, but I hadn't gotten accustomed to using that thing yet. The hose I'm about to shake is the hose that you need to take off. Boom.
Now, fill this hose up with distilled water and let it go through quite a bit.
That's so you get the mineral-containing water out of the system. Now, if you want to flush the rest of the system, reconnect the thermostat housing without the thermostat in there so that the fluid can flow through and jam water through the engine block, and of course rinse it out with distilled water so that the minerals aren't left in there. I'm running out of sunlight here, so I'm not showing you the process. So clean and dry the gasket area, or let it dry rather. And then this against the engine. This is the paper backing. There's a very mild adhesive that was on the back of mine, and it sticks on there barely. And then this goes inside, and I think you probably want to put these tabs on the top and bottom. They help kind of hold it in, and the reason top and bottom is it'll want to fall backward out of that metal tube, and then if it's like that, then there's a lot of leverage against the tabs and it'll want to fall out, but there's less leverage against that tab and it's less likely to fall out if it's in that direction. Of course, you want to clean the surface that this mates to. When you stick the flange in, I think it's better to probably have the bolts in there and probably take off your gloves because it's really awkward to get in there. And hold this bolt in position, and then preferably with a magnetic nut driver, 10mm, you want to put it in by hand so that it threads in, and then
Probably kind of tight so that you don't really give this gasket a chance to fall off. It's going to want to fall off. So it depends on how dry your thing is. But yeah, and then you can always look between the plastic housing and the engine. There's that little crack you can always look down in to make sure that this thing isn't falling backward. And just tighten it down hand tight with a small wrench, just not super tight. And then, you know, put the hoses back on, fill it up.
Torque the bolts to about 15 foot-pounds, not too tight to snap it. For me, the hardest part of the process was dealing with the old gasket material that was stuck on the engine block. And so I made a separate video about a little tool that I made to scrape off the gasket, but you could probably use like Goo Gone, some weird chemical, and maybe you could just use a green scrubby and lots of elbow grease. But I did make a tool. You feel free to check that out. It'll be linked in the description.